You can't just kind of gloss over it or be like, I don't know, they know what they're doing. Start to question it. Question whether or not there is some kind of background force acting upon this, and a lot of it is these big corporations that back and fund all these politicians, and it's disgusting, and we need to put a stop to it. And there's plenty of it in the Democratic Party, and that's what a lot of people are ignoring or just don't realize. Welcome back to the Last Thing podcast, where two unqualified idiots are redefining the word humility by yet again diving in the deep end of the political septic tank that is America. My name is Ryan, and with me as always is my trusty co-host Josh, who inevitably steals the show with his natural charisma and wisdom as a well-traveled monk. He does most of the talking, and for good reason, which is why this is my time to shine. This episode will be our first of our Profiles in Cowardice series. Josh, if you could describe, what is the purpose overall of this series?
I think there's a few different things we're going for. We have a sort of a target demographic in young men who have a crazy lack of leadership in front of them. The people that young men have to look up to nowadays there's some good, I don't want to say they're all bad, but there's some very, very popular people that young men look up to that really shouldn't be looked up to, not because of who they are, their identity, or what they do, but because of their stances in relation to the human beings and their countrymen around them. So the main goal of this is to sort of provide counter-programming to what is colloquially referred to as the manosphere. We are two happily married men with pretty good lives. We've done well for ourselves without taking advantage of the people around us. And we have good relationships with women and men in our lives. We have a different perspective than men that can't hang their hat on those accolades that I consider real accolades. The purpose of this series, the Profiles in Cowardice, I mean, we do shop talk, we do some food stuff, we do books, we've done a lot about books, political and otherwise. And this Profile in Cowardice series, I think, is it's an important part where, like, a lot of you've ever heard like the kernel of truth expression. A lot of the programming that we see, this sort of like right-wing slop that we see on the internet, is able to permeate young men especially, but people in general. Boomers is another good example of the people that it permeates best, because there are kernels of truth in things that are coming from the right wing and the Republicans. And a lot of the criticisms that they have for the Democratic Party and for anyone that's left of center, honestly, it's sort of vague nonsense. And so what I think we want to do with this Profiles in Cowardice, and with some of our other political content as well, is to reframe the conversation on this side of the aisle. Because honestly, if you're going to try to have conversations with people on the right wing at this point, you have to be very well prepared. And honestly, they're conversations that oftentimes aren't worth having. We need to have better conversations on the left side of the aisle. And when I say left, I mean everything from like center left all the way to like a true progressive, which is, and on most issues, I consider myself what I would call progressive. I'm not really a leftist necessarily. I believe in like a hybrid ideology of leftism and maybe a little conservatism sprinkled in for me personally. But as a country, I think that conservatism and more like leftist ideologies have to coexist. Certain things taking the reins on certain issues and certain things taking the reins on other issues. But I do consider myself a progressive because all of my opinions are forward looking. And we cannot look forward as, I'm going to say a party because I vote with Democrats, but I am no longer a registered Democrat. I wasn't a registered Democrat until 2016. I was an independent before. I'm an independent now, registered, but we have a two-party system. So when I say these things, like, I'm caveating that ahead of time for the kind of like ease of access to like categorizing people. It makes it a little easier. It's kind of like calling people boomers. It's like a lot of Gen X is indistinguishable from boomers ideologically. And so I kind of say boomers and I mean both, but whatever. So this Profiles in Cowardice, it's really not for someone that's on the right wing. Like, they don't give a shit about Debbie Wasserman Schultz, They don't give a shit about whether or not the Democrats have a functioning party. And most of the Democrats don't care if they have a functioning party, but we do. I want a thriving ecosystem of good candidates to be able to appeal to voters without the interference of a party, like of an organization of 20 to 30 people making decisions on behalf of millions of registered voters that should have a say in the political process. We've seen some of the cowardice that we're referring to in the election cycle is what we saw most recently with Zohran Mamdani in New York, one of the most progressive cities on planet Earth in many ways, in certain neighborhoods especially. And for some reason, the Democratic Party at a national level is afraid to let them have a qualified candidate that represents the people he will be working for. We saw them fight at every stage that they could when Cuomo was still in the race, or when Cuomo first got back into the race. We saw them ignore him. We saw them not take advantage of the platform. We saw them, in some cases, endorse Cuomo. We saw them, in many cases, choose not to endorse anyone. Even New York senators and Congress people didn't endorse anyone until the last minute, even after a Democratic primary where Mamdani handily won the Democratic primary. That's the last example. We saw Kamala Harris get picked for us. We saw Joe Biden. We saw the Democratic Party at the congressional and Senate level, at the House and Senate level, as well as mayors and governors all over the country, choose to ignore the fact that the man was deteriorating in front of our very eyes, and we were being made fools of as a party and as a group of people that get lumped in together, whether we like it or not, by the fact that they refuse to acknowledge how quickly and significantly he was deteriorating, and how dangerous that is for us as a country to have a leader that is genuinely not all there, that can't formulate complete sentences, that can't stay on topic, that can't stay awake. I mean, it's a problem. It's a problem with Trump. We've talked and will talk extensively about that. But that's kind of why I was framing it in this way. I was like, this is a conversation for people on the left to participate in, because I am not, the reigning authority on anything. I refuse to believe that I don't get to have an opinion just because I'm not a political scientist or an elected official. That's the opposite of the system we're supposed to live in. And my opinions come from a place of wanting the Democratic Party to do better and to be more of a force against the evil that we see in the Republican Party right now. And they're feckless cowards that refuse to participate in the democratic process honestly, because they think that it would significantly impact their opportunity to continue getting a paycheck from the American people. That's the bottom line. Honestly, their paychecks really come from the corporations that we all work for or whatever. But the framework is such that we have to have a better conversation on the left, even though I don't consider a lot of Democrats on the left at all. They're barely distinguishable from Republicans at this point. So Profiles in Cowardice, in our context, will primarily focus on Democrats that have failed to fight they failed to do their job, as I understand it. We have to start with self-policing, because if we can't police ourselves on the left, then we open ourselves to all sorts of ridicule from the right. I genuinely mean moral failure from a professional standpoint. That is the main thing, is that you took an oath to the Constitution, and in that oath to the Constitution is not just the understanding that you will follow the letter of the Constitution. It's an implied promise to the people that you work for that you're going to make life better for them when other people try to make it worse. And what we've seen from the Democratic Party is an overt and intentional failure to even pretend they're doing it.
We're generally we're generally covering a lot of the failings in the Democratic Party, but specifically the individual. We will be picking them off one by one. And today we're pulling back the curtain on a polarizing and controversial figure. That'd be Wasserman Schultz. Rose from the Florida State House, becoming the youngest woman ever elected there at just 26 years old. Kind of impressive. To the U.S. House of Representatives. In 2011, she reached the pinnacle of party power, ascending to the post of chair of the Democratic National Committee, as we'll dive into that. But with that power came a critical test, a test of principle, integrity, political courage. And as we look at the major controversies that defined her career particularly during her time at the DNC, we have to ask, were her most controversial actions, from stacking the primary deck to defending special interests, acts of strength, or were they acts of profound cowardice by self-serving calculation and ultimately harming the very party she has sworn to lead? We're going to walk through the evidence, look at the DNC email scandal, her legislative decisions regarding vulnerable populations, her political survival instincts, actions supporting Israel's mass murder of innocent lives, and we'll call it what it truly is. It's a genocide, plain and simple. What a
Yeah, it's been a
scumbag.
genocide since like
Awful, awful,
very
awful.
early on in the recent version of the conflict.
We refuse to not call it like it is. And at this point, anything but that is grossly inaccurate.
And dangerous.
Yes,
If we set a
absolutely.
precedent for what's happened in Gaza as a nation, for that to be something that we excuse, obviously our government is going to try and excuse it, but if we as a population refuse to call it what it is, we set a precedent for the next conflict to get closer to our doorsteps.
We cannot leave any sort of, we can't have any room in the armor. This is our way of trying to fortify whatever it is we're trying to build now, because this whole series is going to be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people who listen on the left. And
yeah, probably, yes.
It probably, from some of the characters we'll talk about in the future, but maybe even this one starting now. We're not going to hold back because a lot of the stuff is pretty bad.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into it. All right, we're in 2016 during the election. There's Hillary Clinton versus the other sort of the largest front runner, Bernie Sanders.
It's pretty much a two-way race between them.
Yeah, at that point.
That point.
And I mean, so there obviously was a huge popularity with Hillary being the perceived historical, not only historical sort of precedent of like a woman that could be president, but also just generally a woman in politics, kind of paving a way for that kind of example for young women. So that she definitely had a lot behind her, but Bernie had just as much, right? Like, people loved Bernie, and to this day. But
yeah, I think statistically he may not have been like as popular as some people wish he was. He was very popular among a specific demographic, young men, but he was also running on a populist platform. Mm-hmm. For me, I wasn't really a Bernie bro. I really kind of, at that point, I had lost all faith in the Democratic Party, and I knew they were going to make Hillary Clinton the candidate. Early on in the campaign, CNN, MSNBC, all of them, CBS, and the rest of them were actively working against Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
Based on, these are ideological decisions made at the editorial level, which it has to happen. There has to be some hand on the scale ideologically at the editorial level. What I'm saying is that the ideology that they were using and the editors that were making these editorial decisions were the ideology that they had is dollar bills. That's the only thing they gave a single solitary shit about, is dollar bills. There was no genuine ear to the ground, sort of like grassroots understanding of the Democratic Party being used on that scale. They saw Hillary Clinton as essentially a cash cow for the military industrial complex, having been Secretary of State and having been a war criminal, essentially. I mean, to avoid like libel and threats of lawsuits, we'll say like a lot of people think that she's a war criminal. And at that time, having been in the military, having been in special operations, having been to Africa, very close to when Benghazi happened, I was very well aware of kind of the people who paid attention to foreign policy, how those people perceived her, and it was not good. Trey Gowdy was doing a good job slandering her with those committee hearings and all of that after Benghazi, and Benghazi is not what I'm referring to either when I say these things about her. Like she had made cold, vile decisions all over planet Earth as Secretary of State.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever seen the video of like her saying like we came, we saw, he died, and then laughing, that is a good example of like that. You could distill her entire tenure as into that little clip of her like basically laughing about killing some guy. I don't give a shit who you're killing. There's nothing funny about it. It isn't funny. It's not a joke. It's not a punchline at a convention. It just isn't. And listen, I'm all down. I'm a silly goose guy. You know what I mean? But if I'm serving on behalf of a population of people, then I would be representing those people in everything I do afterward, especially knowing the opinion that people have of me already.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably more is going to come out as the years go on, and as things get declassified, more and more heinous decisions will be made public. But like she had a popularity, and with good reason. If you're talking from a standpoint of qualifications, intelligence, experience, there's
connections.
Like you were saying, the precedent that it would set to have a woman president would be great. Like there were aspects of that from a certain political perspective. She's a good candidate. If you're an advertiser, if you're like a news agency that makes their money based on ad dollars, you see Hillary Clinton running and you're like, oh, it's going to be a waterfall of gold coins straight into my underwear. I need to get a bigger pair. Like that makes sense. So like the idea that these people were supporting her was great from their perspective and from like a Wall Street exec's perspective or whatever. But the reality of the situation is they never gave a single crap about what the voters wanted. And I don't necessarily think that had they done that Bernie Sanders would have won. She may still
we'll never know.
Exactly. We'll never know. We'll never know. We'll never know. That's the fucking problem, is we'll never know what would have happened had the two of them stood on a debate stage on a night when everyone was off work and had a fair discourse about their ideas. We will never know, because that is not what happened. We'll never know what would have happened if he would have been given as much airtime on CNN as she was. We will simply never know. We'll never know if he would have had the same financial backing from larger institutions and from the individuals with platforms outside of these legacy media organizations. We'll never know. And we'll never know because of Debbie Wasserman Schultz and her ilk.
Yes. Mm-hmm. She had expressed bias for Hillary Clinton, as many of them did, but she played a very important role in all of this.
Now, they were pretending this was a fair and equal process and that everyone was getting a fair wag all the way up until these emails came out.
Mm-hmm. And it really showed. It showed the people who were trying to stack the cards against Bernie, despite his rise in popularity. They limited number of debates. The DNC initially sanctioned only 6 debates for the entire primary season.
Republicans had like a dozen.
Yeah, compared to 11 for the Republican primary. At the timing, several of the debates were scheduled for times when TV viewership is historically low, specifically on Saturday nights or holiday weekends. There was smear tactics, the intent of emails sent to high-ranking DNC officials to damage Sanders' campaign, and in certain conservative states, specifically Kentucky and West Virginia. And these emails, when they came out,
possible swing states, maybe not at the national level, but like at local levels.
Yeah, very important. And these emails, when they came out, they confirmed the suspicion held by a lot of Sanders supporters that the DNC was actively working to ensure Hillary Clinton won the nomination. It severely damaged the trust between the party leadership and the entire base. There was immediate and intense backlash from Sanders supporters who felt betrayed, disenfranchised. This outrage overshadowed the start of the DNC that week. Just totally rigging the rules and rigging the system against Bernie. So we'll never know. We'll never know if he did have a chance and whether he was going to be the better candidate because of all of this.
Well, he couldn't have been worse.
Sure.
As a political candidate, losing to the most polarizing figure in history, losing to someone as ignorant and hateful and bigoted as Donald Trump. The idea that she is even taken seriously in political life after that is obscene to me.
Mm-hmm.
What we're talking about here is the DNC was like actively denying, like people had their suspicions. It was not that veiled, you know. People were suspecting the entire time. They were like, man, it doesn't seem like he's not getting any interviews on bigger news agencies. They're not covering when something good happens for him. The poll numbers, there were like poll numbers early on in the campaign where like they would have like a silhouette, one of those black Pokemon silhouettes instead of Bernie Sanders' picture. Like they did not want to debate on even ground. And I think a large part of it was, this comes from the top of the DNC. This is like the DNC is the apparatus that these things are disseminating from. The media was probably being, I can't make specific accusations here, but like based on other things that have happened since that have been exposed, I would guess that the Clinton campaign was making explicit and implicit promises of exclusivity with certain members of what would become a cabinet, like exclusive interviews, that sort of thing, exclusive access with certain people, that sort of thing. Essentially saying like, you're not going to get that from a more adversarial campaign and cabinet in a Sanders cabinet campaign. That's just one angle of this like 20-sided die that was going into it. It was like the connective tissue between the DNC and the media organizations. And there was like a little bit of a bump from the fact that Trump was so polarizing. You know, we forget now, but like it wasn't 80 million people immediately. Sure. It took them 10 years to propagandize and indoctrinate this many people. I was one of the first people that was afraid it would get this bad in 2016. Today happening. ICE agents in the streets rounding up people like it was a South Park episode. I saw that in 2016, and it's because I had no faith in the Democratic Party to stop him, you know, and it's because I grew up around these Republicans that can be, maybe they weren't this racist or this bigoted or this hateful 10 years ago, but I knew that it was in the blood. I knew that it could bubble up if someone just agitated it properly. And I saw Trump saying all the right things to these people, you know. I happen to, you know, have ties in poor rural Alabama, rural Illinois, and I happened to join the military when I was 18. And so a lot of those people are leaning a little bit more to the right. I knew so many people that I was like, damn, that person is gonna fall for this shit. Because I've had conversations with them about other things, and I just know. And so like watching the Wasserman Schultzes of the world ignore that and act like, I think what they thought was that these people are dumb rednecks. No one's going to vote with them, and they're just going to lose an election because they pick an unelectable president. They had no idea how much hatred there was from the center, what was at that time the center, and now is just, you know, normal right-wing politics. But like, they had no idea how much hatred they had garnered throughout the Obama administration. We did not like seeing the financial institutions get bailed out and not bail out the American people. We did not like seeing the auto industry get bailed out at the top, but the workers not get bailed out. We did not like seeing those things. We did not like seeing a war drag on for 20 years. We didn't like seeing people giggling and bombing fucking weddings. We did not like that shit. Normal people didn't like it at all. And it was pretty split in that middle section for sure. But I just think they underestimated people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Now, now this is what's important about everything I just said. Is like, how can someone underestimate their own voters? How would they? Well, it's because they had just spent 8 years completely fucking ignoring them. They had just spent 8 years learning that, yeah, we can ignore the shit out of our voters and it won't make a political difference because the Republicans are in league with just enough of what we want. And we're just Republican enough to where we don't have to actually have things like a public option. You know what I mean? On the bill the American people were promised.
Yeah.
The DNC made a decision to back a candidate that had actively participated in foreign policy that pissed off everyone, that had actively participated in all sorts of embarrassing behavior on the world stage. They're more worried about what corporations thought than what the voters thought for 8 years. And so, pharmaceutical companies are good. Insurance companies, pharmaceuticals, a lot of other medical industry, the whole military industrial complex is absolutely forking over dough for our campaigns. So why do we give a single solitary fuck about what our voters want? It doesn't matter. We're going to shove another pipeline through their backyard. Well, it turns out that it doesn't matter how many dollars Walmart gives to your campaigns. You will still lose elections if the other person is listening to his base, even if they're crazy. The Democrats have a huge advantage in that the Democratic progressive side of their base isn't crazy people. It's people that want common sense legislation passed. It's people that want common sense reform on red flag laws and some other gun legislation that would make our communities safer. It's people that want education to provide the basics for kids and that want education to be well funded. It's people that want healthcare to be available to all of our countrymen. These aren't radical things. But the Democratic base or the Democratic elected side of the coin is essentially owned. I mean, it's like at this point, it's just owned outright by corporations. There's no way around that. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz is the type of person that allows and facilitates that ecosystem to continue.
Yeah. And as those emails came out, she resigned in disgrace. And she didn't do it because it was, it was the proper moral thing to do. She did it because she was caught, more of a forced retreat rather than out of principle. There were no consequences. She still secured a senior surrogate spot on the Clinton campaign afterwards. She made a swift return to prominent leadership roles in the House, including Appropriations Committee and Policy Committee, noting as usual she maintained proximity to party power despite this scandal. Absolutely zero accountability. Let's dive into some of the more legislative side of Debbie. We'll talk about the payday lending legislation. She co-sponsored it was a 2015 bill, the HR 4018, that would have delayed the implementation of Consumer Finance Protection Bureau regulations. For people who don't know or are not as knowledgeable in this, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is the federal agency created after 2008 financial crisis, specifically to write and enforce rules that protect consumers in the financial marketplace, including regulations for payday loans. They were in the process of drafting and finalizing new federal rules intended to prevent borrowers from getting caught in high-interest debt cycles for payday loans. For people who don't know, again, payday loans is like small, short-term, unsecured loans that borrower typically promises to pay back out of their next paycheck.
These are highly predatory.
Small amounts, $500 or less, but yes, very predatory. They get you in this cycle of debt, and it's despicable. And there was going to be regulations.
Once these people get sucked into these cycles, it's from a mathematical standpoint, unless things dramatically change, which if you're using a payday loan, you're probably already struggling in one way or another. And it gets people stuck into, essentially, if you don't start making more money, the math doesn't work out that you'll ever be able to pay this back unless you come upon some money or something like that. They're high. I mean, honestly, if we're being full transparency here, I don't believe that the credit card companies should be able to charge what they're charging in interest rates. I think it's criminal.
Yes. It's the same thing with credit cards. Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of the math behind these interest rates it's psychotic. Is it 23% on some of these? You shouldn't even be offering the person a credit card. That's crazy. 6 is high. 7 is high. These people, they are not hurting for money if everyone's paying 6% interest, at all. They're not hurting at all. And so the idea that these companies, some of the most profitable companies on planet Earth that do the least, from the standpoint of like production, offer these interest rates is psychotic. These payday loans were even worse than that. And I think that the credit card thing, like I think any politician that stands up and says like, listen, anybody that's been charging these astronomical interest rates is going to have to stop. I think that would be an extremely popular piece of like policy to stand on as someone who's running. Is like, listen, we're not charging people 23% interest on shit. I don't give a fuck. I don't care if you're giving them a fucking kidney. There's no 23% interest. That's not fucking interest. That's exploitation. It's crazy. It's crazy. But she sees these, usually like pawn shops and stuff, things in that vein, will do these loans where you say, yeah, I've got $600 coming in on my paycheck on Friday, but I have a bill due on Wednesday or whatever. I'm just using easy days. Can I borrow the money now? And then when I get paid, I'll give you the money. Conceptually, someone's saying, I have no money. And so the next time I get money, I'll give all of it to you. What are you going to do then? The idea is that there's still this even spacing between when they get paid, but that you'll advance them. They'll give you all that. Now they have a longer period of time before they get paid again. If you're living paycheck to paycheck and you get behind one paycheck, you're now living paycheck. It's not even paycheck. Like you're just waiting on the paycheck to survive. That can't work. And so the idea that these companies were even doing it at all is kind of crazy. I understand that like it is a service that, if done ethically, could possibly help people for sure. But we understood at the time, the whole reason that the Protection Bureau was targeting this sort of thing is because we understood that it was not happening fairly. It was being used to exploit people that didn't have the money to live, essentially. Debbie Wasserman Schultz sees this and she's like, what would be cool is if they didn't have to follow the law for 2 more years. That's what would be cool, because I'm a coward and I don't care about my constituents. Probably there was money to interests providing essentially, we don't have to call it bribery because of libel laws, but like quid pro quo, I guess you could call it. It's like, you can count on my lobbyists to take you out to lunch. You can count on campaign dollars in the future.
When
That sort of thing.
Things like this happen with politicians, particularly the ones that you follow and you elect and that you support, when they do things like this, it's important to, especially in obvious situations like this, you got to question, why would they do that? It's so obviously, wrong for these consumers, and it's immoral. Why did she do it? And the answer is some of the things you were stating earlier, that there is these interests in the background that are kind of driving her motivations and legislation in repugnant ways. So you can't just kind of gloss over it or be like, I don't know, they know what they're doing. Start to question it. Question whether or not there is some kind of background force acting upon this. And a lot of it is these big corporations that back and fund all these politicians. And it's disgusting, and we need to put a stop to it. And there's plenty of it in the Democratic Party, and that's what a lot of people are ignoring or just don't realize.
Yeah, people are so scared of how bad the Republican Party is, justifiably so. We're talking about people who they're just espousing fascism. Like, there's really not a better word in our language for what they're doing. It's definitely authoritarianism, the consolidation of power around a singular person, or like an idealistic cult of personality. And it's very much like in the vein of fascism. I mean, I think it's kind of like a pseudo-fascism, it's like a weird modernized version of fascism, because like there are still freedoms, but like they're blurring the lines between where the freedoms are and who they exist for. I know that in some ways that's always been true in this country, but like the idea that they're moving that pen backwards is what makes it's so fascist. I mean, it's very much out of the same playbook. A lot of the same exact vernacular is being used. And so people are scared like you were saying, like people are ignoring the problems on the left and just saying like, yeah, sure, there's some problems on the left. They're not really looking into it. They don't really care. They don't realize that like, if we can address the problems on the left, then the boogeyman on the right gets a lot easier to roundhouse kick. Like,
Yeah.
it would be very easy to win elections if the Democrats would dip their toes in with the rest of the American population, see how the water is, because it's hot and piss, but we have to live in it because we aren't the elected officials. We aren't rich people. You know what I mean? Like we have to live in the normal life that they're creating. And because for decades now, they've lived in a completely different rung of society, they don't give a solitary shit. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is not an evil person, I'm sure, like, but from the standpoint of the American people and from the standpoint of like a normal American, that is as evil as it gets, is Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She's like the cream on the top of the evil latte. Like she has participated in and been complicit in behavior that has made the lives of the American people worse when she is smart enough and competent enough to participate in the system in such a way that makes the American people's life better. And refusing to do that in the interest of probably money, I would say, is the main thing. Maybe a little bit of ideology here and there, but I'm sure it's mostly just fucking money and winning the next election. If you're more worried about doing those things than serving the people in the best way you can at the moment, I have nothing for you other than fucking contempt.
Let's jump over to Israel now. She has consistently voted for and advocated for significant U.S. military and security funding for Israel. Although she and many other Democrats who are on board with this always wrap it in the idea of Israel having the right to defend itself, and that we are, we're funding the Iron Dome. There's missiles coming at them all the time, and we're here to protect them. And then I think a lot of people might hear that and be like, oh, okay, well, that's good. That's fine. But then there's the whole other side of it where we're just directly funding Israel to drop bombs on innocent lives, not only, Palestinians, but also like other citizens of other countries who are trying to help people over there. Just dropping bombs on doctors or, rescuers. And they're trying to kind of hide it in this democratic perspective of we're just trying to save innocent lives of Israelis, which is just bullshit.
Yeah, it was, gosh, when October 7th happened, I was like talking to my wife about it. I was like, a lot of people are not going to realize like how bad this is going to be for months. I did not think that it would be years, admittedly, but I knew that it was going to be a completely unreasonable and I would really be very careful with my language here. I was very well aware that the people that Benjamin Netanyahu had to come together with to stay in power, he's avoiding a criminal case. So he consolidated power around the farthest right wing of their government. That's an oversimplification, but that's pretty much what happened. Like the people that are in power now and that have been running this genocide, it was very clear that if after something like that happened, if they were allowed to just do whatever they wanted, that what we would see is what we have seen. It's sickening that things like this happen at all. But what should make us more sick as Americans is the fact that it's being done with our tax dollars and probably partially at our behest. Acknowledging the reality of the situation, which is that the Israeli government, with a really surprising amount of support from the Israeli population, has been committing and is probably still committing, even with the ceasefire. I think more people just got bombed recently. A genocide, like you said earlier, plain and simple. We cannot let our politicians operate politically with like carte blanche. Every single person should be shouting this from the rooftops, whether you're MAGA Republican, which ironically many MAGA Republicans have been shouting this from the rooftops. They're very,
Sure.
but unfortunately, because they're anti-Semitic and they hate Jews and they think Jews run the world.
The Nick Fuenteses of the
right,
world.
right. I guess take a win when you can take a win, but like this is not popular with the American people, and it's definitely not popular with American people that are actually knowledgeable about what's going on. The actions we've seen, the actions that have been documented, are unconscionable. And they're being done with equipment we make or help make, or that we buy and give to them, or that they buy from us. It's just completely unacceptable. Like you were talking about specifically, listen, I don't give a shit if they have 5,000 rocket launchers underneath the hospital. You don't bomb the hospital. Bill Burr had a hilarious joke where he's talking about this issue and he's like, well, they're using them as human shields. And he goes, you got to work around that.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody's holding up a baby and you're trying to punch them, you have to throw a hook. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to punch, like, and we know that the Israeli government also agrees with this because one of their main government facilities is also under a hospital. Many of their defenses are placed in and around large population centers, because that's where they need to be to defend the large population centers. Like, the idea that like hospitals could be used as human shields is just crazy, especially with the equipment and personnel that the IDF or IOF has. You have to find a better way than dropping the bombs on tents full of kids and shit. Like, you just have to. Or you have to be okay with people like me who extensively learned the laws of armed conflict, who extensively learned the Geneva Conventions when I was in the military and in special operations. You have to be okay with people like me calling you a war criminal, because we know the rules of war, we know the laws of armed conflict, and we understand the Geneva Conventions. You can't kill people with this civilian casualty rate and have people believe otherwise. It's impossible. A lot of people that do these interviews representing the IDF or IOF will say, like, we're not targeting children. It doesn't matter. I have really bad news for you. It doesn't matter if you're targeting children or if you're targeting civilians. If they keep dying in your strikes en masse, you are committing a genocide. Like, I mean, this is one of the things of a genocide, but like, it doesn't say like completely eradicating a people's. It says like destroying a people or their culture, and I can't remember the exact terminology for the definition of genocide, but it says in whole or in part. And they're just checking all of these boxes, whether you're destroying them entirely or not. It's a genocide, and we can't as Americans not speak out about that. But moreover, and more so, we can't let our elected representatives off the hook for what has happened under their watch. This is why I was talking about looking backwards before us, because if we just try to say like, oh, it's water under the bridge, it's fucking not water under the bridge. It's not water under the bridge. It's not water under the bridge for hundreds of thousands of veterans like myself. It's not water under the bridge for the victims and for their families. It's not water under the bridge for like-minded people from other backgrounds. It just isn't. And the sooner that they can get on board with the reality of the situation, the sooner that they can appeal to large swaths of the American population. And because the reality is, Mamdani was openly against the genocide, was openly saying, I'm not going to go and kiss the ring in another country that we keep their head above the water, financially and militarily. We don't kiss their ring. They can kiss our ring, I guess, if you wanted to put things in that term. But why would an American politician have to go to Israel for anything? That's crazy. I get it if a Christian wants to go and see the wall or whatever and kind of participate in that type of thing. But like, from the American standpoint, Israel is a military partner and a creation of the British government in 1947. Our politicians need to be representing us. And Mamdani just basically did a common sense stance from that perspective and won in a fucking landslide. And, I'll tell you a major demographic he won with, like Jewish kids. Like, Jewish kids know that being against the actions of Israel is not being against Jewish guys. Like, no one gives a shit nowadays if you're Jewish. in this country. I mean, obviously there's like the Nick Fuenteses of the world, but they represent a small minority. Most of
Mm-hmm.
the Republicans are, flying over and kissing a wall with yarmulkes on. All of the Democrats are supported by AIPAC. Like what is all of this anti-Semitism you're talking about? It's just against the actions of their government. And Jewish people understand that.
Yeah. And people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
And how much money has she taken from AIPAC? Can we look that up?
Sure. Let's see.
I'm going to guess over 300,000. And this is documented, not including like individual donations and stuff like that, which like AIPAC is trying to now hide their donations in individual donator.
This is saying she's received over $1 million from
Are you fucking
pro-Israel
kidding me?
sources.
That makes me sick to my fucking stomach.
Total over $1 million.
Ugh. That's way worse than I thought.
People like Debbie who are rejecting the term genocide are just providing a vital political shield that insulates Israel from international diplomatic and legal consequences, allowing, this to just keep going. So we can't just kind of sit back and ignore it. We got to keep yelling as much as we can and get more people on board, because it's one of the most disgusting acts in present day.
And
Yeah.
it's important from our demographic. It's like the whole reason we call it the last thing is because the last thing anybody wants to see is two more white guys with microphones. Like,
Yeah.
it is the reality of the situation is that we're in an influential demographic based on the current climate in our country. That's the reality. The demographic of people we're reaching out to is important for elections. The demographic that we are in represents a overrepresented portion of the power levers, access to the levers of power in our world. That's not for the better, but it's the reality of the situation as it is. And so like you could take that as a point of convenience, like many do, and just say, oh, I don't pay attention, or we're not going to go into something as controversial as that. Like that's the opposite of why we're doing this. And that's the opposite of how I personally feel about things like that. We should also mention what's going on in Sudan. We aren't actively directly funding it, but it's bad. We might learn after the fact, like once investigations are done and whatever, like that this is one of the worst ones possibly since the Rwandan genocide. I mean, gosh, I can't even say. There's unfortunately so many genocides have happened in the last 70 years, but like we have a killing fields situation happening in Sudan.
Yeah. It's not being covered by current media.
Yeah. They're barely even mentioning it at all. And it's just what I've seen. Very, very fucking bad. There's a lot of conflicts going on around Africa right now, and a lot of like imposed situations that have been created by the remnants of and the continuation of imperialism, kind of like this new neo-imperialistic way that we've let like kind of corporations become the representatives on the world stage for national interests. It's not good. It's really bad. But it's not what we're talking about right now. But it's like in the same vein, we can't pretend like there's like this is the only thing going on. Obviously, there's a war of aggression happening from Russia and Ukraine. Another crazy one that is now they've gotten bored of it in the media.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy to see that they just are not talking about
There's
an
so
active
many
war going on in fucking Europe.
So many of these happening so often that it's just like we're done. We're tired of that. Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
All right. Well, the
Over
core
$1 million.
takeaways.
Over $1 million from Israeli interests makes me sick to my fucking stomach.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
It's horrible.
God damn, I'm like losing even more faith in the Democrats as this goes on.
So core takeaways. By fostering distrust, alienating a large segment of the progressive movement, Debbie helped sow the seeds of disunity and plagued the Democrats for many years to come. The sheer audacity of Debbie Wasserman Schultz to stand as an unwavering shield for Israel while the world watches in endless stream of innocent human lives of children, mothers, elderly being annihilated is utterly despicable. She's chosen to prioritize a political alliance over fundamental sanctity of human life. Her calculated, cold-hearted defense is one of the most disgusting betrayals of progressive values and basic human decency, placing her in a direct opposition to the growing, heartbroken demand for justice. Political courage is not just about standing up to opposition. Sometimes it's about having the integrity to stand aside or even stand up to your own allies when fairness demands it. For Debbie Wasserman Schultz, her legacy is inextricably linked to decisions that we argue failed that critical test astronomically. Any more closing thoughts on Debbie?
Just that, the problem with these people that we're going to be covering is that they are pushing Democrats away, pushing potential Democrats away, and they're handing ammunition to the Republicans. Like we always want to say after criticizing the Democrats, the Republicans are worse.
The Republicans are worse.
Yeah, that's a refrain you will hear a lot from us. But giving the Republicans this legitimate fire to use against you it's just beyond my capability of understanding outside of it's all financial. It's all that they're getting paid. It makes no sense to make life easier for the Republicans because we know that they have a media ecosystem and a messaging infrastructure that can take a little kernel of truth, send it through this machine, and it comes out the other side as a monster in the media cycle, and they fill it with lies and bullshit, but they don't need to worry about the majority of what it is as long as they can keep pointing to that little kernel of truth. And people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the Hillary Clinton thing and a lot of the legislation, they can always point back to people like her and actions like her actions and help facilitate an easier election cycle for themselves, which is the main reason we're criticizing people like this, is that we want the Republicans to presumably lose elections or to at least abandon their most radical instincts, because their most radical instincts lose elections. And we want Democrats to have better candidates. We want democratic cities to be sort of these beacons of hope on our political landscape, such as it is. And we want Democratic voters and Republican voters alike in the future to live better, happier, longer lives in sort of cohabitation and unity with one another. That's the American dream. And so from my perspective, the way we do that is we adequately criticize and self-police ourselves.
Yeah.
And for that to happen, people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz have to leave public life, and they have to, go write a book, which they inevitably will, and fuck off forever, because there's no room for people like this in a Democratic Party that wins elections. There's no room for a Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
And, if ever that time comes where she sort of tries to disappear in obscurity and maybe write a book talking about some of her best moments or how she contributed to the greater good or whatever, it'll be up to people like us to talk about how that absolutely wasn't the case and that she was a monster. And people can refer to this episode and restart the conversation so that people like her don't get away with it,
Yes, inevitably in 10 years they're going to be rebranded. They'll all be like Zohran Mamdani's policies have always been the platform.
It'll be a Operation Paperclip of Democrats.
Yeah, that's funny.